The city woke under a lid of cloud, and the first sound was rain against glass. Mara stood by the window with her coffee growing cool, steadying herself with the simple ritual of steam and silence. The calendar on the wall carried more crossed days than empty squares. She had stopped counting after a while, yet her body still measured time in the ache between what she prayed for and what she could see. Somewhere below, a bus sighed to a stop, and someone laughed on the sidewalk, and the world kept moving forward. Her apartment held the slower pace of waiting. On the table by the window lay a small Bible with a page worn soft by returning fingers. The verse that steadied her spoke of a beauty that comes in its time. She had said the words out loud once, then again in a whisper, then not at all. She learned to hold them quietly like a stone in her pocket. She did not stop believing, but belief began to feel like a long hallway lined with closed doors and no sound from the other side. She walked to work beneath a sky the color of tin, counting her steps the way joggers count their breaths. Inside the cafe, warmth and movement replaced the gray. Milk hissed, grinders thudded, cups clicked against saucers. She moved through the morning with practiced ease. Names, orders, smiles, a gentle nod toward regulars who found comfort in the same drink made the same way. Her hands knew the choreography even when her heart felt offbeat. Each break sent her to the corner table near the window. Rain turned the street into brushstrokes, and each drop fell with its own small conviction. Time kept moving, and somehow that fact both comforted and pressed on her. Her phone vibrated once. The subject line carried a familiar weight. She did not open the message right away. She placed the phone face down and pressed the small cross at her throat. She wanted to understand the logic of this season. She wanted to see cause and effect. She wanted a reason that would settle the restless questions that woke with her, and walked beside her and fell asleep last at night. The shelter she had hoped to join had sent 3 rejections across 9 months, and each one landed like a quiet no that still echoed. She wondered if she had missed a turn, or if she was standing at the right road simply too early to be met. That afternoon the sun broke through the clouds and left everything slick with light. On her walk home, she passed a florist setting buckets of tulips on the sidewalk. Their heads were still closed, tight fists of color, already carrying the future of their opening. She paused and watched the water drip from each stem, then kept going. Down the block the river slid by the city with unhurried confidence, and the wind lifted her hair and brought the smell of damp, stone and iron. She cooked a small dinner, washed the dishes by hand, and let the apartment grow quiet. The stillness pressed at first, then settled. She lit a candle on the windowsill and let the flame teach her to look at one thing for more than a moment. She found herself thinking about years that made no sense until later. A childhood injury that kept her from a trip where an accident happened. A class she took only because another had filled that brought her a mentor she still called. A friendship that seemed to fade until a crisis revealed its true strength. Some patterns appeared only in hindsight. It felt possible that this season would one day join them. The week unfolded with the gentle friction of routine. Morning light on dishes. The scrape of a chair on tile at the cafe. The astringent smell of citrus cleaner at closing time. A neighbor's dog snuffling at a lamppost with reverence for everything ordinary. She tried to practice gratitude without forcing it. She named the small things. The first strawberries of the season. The feel of warm laundry against her arms. The way the sky sometimes blushed over the river for no clear reason and then returned to gray. Each small recognition felt like a seed pushed into soil. She could not make a seed open. She could only keep the ground tended. On Thursday, she took a different route home and stepped into the cathedral that rose from the city like a stone ship. She found a wooden pew near the back and let the air settle over her. Candles flickered in their small glass cups, and the scent of beeswax held its own gentle sermon. No music played and no service moved the crowd. The building simply breathed, and she breathed with it. She did not ask for anything new. She only set down the weight of guarded hope and stood there empty-handed. In that empty space a quiet assurance rose. Not a plan, not a map, only a sense that this waiting was not blank but full of a work she could not see. She stayed until her shoulders loosened and then stepped back into the city with its streaming cars and hurried voices. No miracle stood on the sidewalk waiting. Only a steadier step, Friday brought a delivery truck's backfiring engine and a spill of coffee grounds that turned the floor into brown snow. She laughed with the other barista, and felt the laughter sit clean in her chest. The phone buzzed again, and for once it was a message from a friend who shared a photo of a baby's first grin. New life keeps starting, she thought, and did not feel left out, only reminded. The day ended and she walked home with grocery bags pulling at her fingers and the streetlights waking in a chain down the block. A young maple threw a long shadow across the sidewalk, and she could see buds along its branches, pointed and sure. Saturday came with a blue sky that felt like a small apology for the week. She baked bread like she used to on long afternoons in college. She measured flour and water and let yeast turn hidden work into rise. The dough rested beneath a clean towel, and she marveled at the quiet science of it. Nothing visible for a while. Then a dome that lifted as if by breath. She shaped the loaf and waited again. It was the waiting that did the transforming. The oven filled the apartment with a comfort that felt like home, deeper than a dress. She broke a piece when it cooled and felt the crust crack and the interior yield. Small miracles live in kitchens. On Sunday, she woke before her alarm and for a moment did not remember why her heart felt light. She stood at the window and sunlight ran like water across the glass. Birds insisted on the story of morning. She made coffee and opened the Bible to the page her fingers knew. The words about time and beauty did not feel like a demand anymore. They felt like an invitation into the choreography of a God who never hurries and never forgets. She closed the book and let the line rest in her mind without needing to repeat it. The day moved gently. She took a bus to the other side of the city and walked through a small market where vendors laughed and argued over the language of peaches and flowers. She stopped for a moment at a stall where a woman sold handmade pottery. There was a bowl glazed the color of ocean shallows, and its surface held the memory of the potter's hands. A bowl begins as earth, then water, then wheel, then fire. Every stage is waiting for the next, and the beauty would shatter if forced. She bought the bowl and wrapped it in paper and carried it like a vow. Afternoon light turned long and soft. She tidied the apartment, watered the plants, answered an email from a cousin, paid a bill. Life did not need to be dramatic to be meaningful. She felt a shift so small she might have missed it if she had not been paying attention. It was the sense that she had finally stopped trying to control the calendar of grace. She would still apply for jobs and still hope to serve with her hands. But the ache behind the hoping had eased. She could finally say with her whole self that if beauty had its time, she wished to live awake inside that time rather than resenting it. Days passed. An early morning fog draped itself over the river and the city looked like a pencil drawing. A child in a red coat ran through steam rising from a street grate, arms thrown out as if it were a stage. A man in a suit crouched to tie his daughter's shoe. The world kept giving small parables to anyone who would look. She kept looking. One evening a summer storm moved in with heat behind it and split the sky with light. She stood beneath her awning and watched rain fall in sudden sheets. Lightning spidered across the cloud base and thunder rolled through her body. It felt like the world pulsing with a force that knew what it was doing. A week later, after a morning spent cleaning the cafe storage room, she checked her phone without expectation and saw a subject line from the shelter that had closed its doors to her again and again. The message said a position had reopened because of a shift in funding and they were reaching out to past applicants whose profiles had stayed with the team. They asked whether she would still be interested in an interview and whether she could come on Thursday afternoon. She read the lines twice while the rhythm of the shop continued around her. She felt no rush of triumph, only a steady gratitude that felt older than the email. She wrote back with a simple yes in a time that worked and placed the phone face down again and kept working, hands steady on the counter, heart steady inside her. On Thursday she walked along the river to settle her nerves. She let the city move around her while she returned to the pace that had carried her through the quiet months. The shelter sat on a corner near a small park where children had turned a bench into a fort. Inside, the hall smelled like fresh paint and possibility. She met a director with kind eyes and a staff lead who spoke about the work as if it were a garden, and each person who walked through the door was a seed that already contained a future. The questions were honest, and the answers came with ease she had not rehearsed. She told the story of her months at the cafe, of learning to see the people in front of her as people first, of small interruptions that taught her patience. She left without knowing the outcome, but with a peace that did not depend on the outcome. The call came the next morning before the first rush. A voice explained the offer and the start date and the training schedule and the way the team worked together. She wrote the details on a napkin and thanked them, and then placed the napkin in her pocket and stepped into the back room. She leaned against the wall and closed her eyes and allowed a few tears to fall and felt them wash a long season clean. It was not that a happy ending had finally arrived. It was that timing had revealed itself to be faithful in a way she could finally name. That evening she walked to the park where she had seen the children playing and sat on a bench near a tree whose leaves lifted with the breeze. The sun lowered behind the buildings and the river kept its quiet work. She thought about the hallway of closed doors and how many had only been closed because she stood in front of them too early. She thought about bread and beeswax and bowls fired in kilns and tulips that hold their color tight until it is time for release. She thought about stories she loved, stories where the waiting chapter turned out to be the center of the book rather than the page to skip. She felt no need to speak, but the prayer rose anyway. God, who writes seasons with a wisdom beyond clocks, thank you for teaching a heart to breathe inside delay. Thank you for the silence that was not absence but careful work beneath the surface. For the days that felt wasted, but were shaping patience and humility and trust. For the hours that held steady when hope felt thin. For the yes that arrived only when it could be held with gratitude instead of fear. When the next slow season comes, and it will keep this memory bright. Remind us that every seed holds a time to rest and a time to break open, and that both are beautiful in your hands. Teach us to step at your pace. Teach us to love the work that cannot be hurried. Let us carry peace into the hallways of waiting for others, so that when someone stands with empty hands, they may see the quiet evidence of your care. Let our lives speak with gentleness that your timing is never late and never careless. Let us remember that even in the pause, love is moving. Amen. She walked home with the last light on the river. The city hummed and windows warmed with evening lamps, and a woman watered plants on a fire escape with a green watering can that flashed in the sun. In the apartment, she placed the ocean-colored bowl on the table and set her keys inside and watched how the glaze caught the light. The cross at her collarbone warmed against her skin. The new job would bring its own difficulties because all real work does. There would be days that felt too full and days that bruised the heart. She felt ready for them. Not because a prayer had finally been answered, but because the prayer had changed her while it waited. Beauty had arrived in its time. She could see it now. She could finally call it by its name.